something outside.
What is that?
Radio.
Good Sunday afternoon, Monster X Radio listeners. This is Gunnar Monson, along with my good friend Shane Corson. As you may well know, in addition to being one of the hosts of Monster X, I am also the founder of the Sasquatch Coffee Company. Sasquatch Coffee, have you tried it yeti? Go to www.squatchcoffee.com and check it out. Get yourself a bag today. With me, as I said, is Mr. Shane Hardcore Corson. Shane, how are you today?
Doing well, Sir Gunnar. Doing well. Really jazzed about the show today. This gentleman, somebody that I follow and I listen to. I think he's fantastic. He's very knowledgeable and very serious about the subject. So today's show is going to be a treat. And this is a two-part show. So this week we'll do part one, and the following week will be part two. So. Hope you all enjoy this show as much as I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of getting to hang out with Thomas on Operation Sea Monkey this last year, where we went up, and Thomas is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, the guy just can tell you story after story of regarding First Nations people and their interaction, how they perceive Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and he spent a good number of years out in the islands, actually living on one of the islands. So it's pretty cool, and I mean I could just sit there like mesmerized listening to him tell his stories. So, and it was Operation Sea Monkey would not have happened without Thomas. And of course Todd Neese, and it was a blast. Like I said, we did not come back with definitive proof of Bigfoot, but we kind of didn't expect that this was kind of a feel it out trip, and we got introduced to the area, and you could see how it wouldn't be difficult for a population of these animals to live in that area. So pretty cool. So I was ready to bring on our guest, Mr. Thomas Sewid. Good afternoon, Thomas. How are you, my friend?
Good, doing good. Nice to hear you again, Gunnar.
Yeah, so you just got back from an exciting trip, I guess.
Oh, man, I don't know where to begin. Everything's just been spinning faster than I can believe in the last 10 days, but we just returned, Peggy and I, from Omaha, Nebraska area, from the Omaha Tribes Indian Reservation, where we went and met with some fellow North American Indian researchers out there, and it was amazing.
That's cool. Well, for folks that aren't familiar with you, can you give us a little bit of your background?
I guess start back when I was a kid. I guess I was born in Alert Bay. I'm a member of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation from northern Vancouver Island, northeastern section, and it's a nation of 16 different tribes with their own names, their own territories, but they all share the common language of Kwakwala, and we call ourselves Kwakwaka'wakw, which simply means the Kwakwala-speaking people. And I belong to the Mamliacha and the Kwakiutl tribes from the mouth of Knight's Inlet and the western section of the Broughton Archipelago, a labyrinth of probably 1,000 islands, I guess, between northeastern Vancouver Island and the mainland. Beautiful territory, and when I grew up in Alert Bay, just as a young boy, I remember going to the potlatches and seeing the dances of the Junakwa and the Bakwus, and then walking through town, you'd see the world's tallest totem pole they were carving when I was a young boy, and at the bottom, now that it's standing, there's a Junakwa, and the graveyard where a lot of our ancestors are laid to rest, right in downtown Alert Bay on a small little island. There's numerous totems, memorial poles to chieftains that passed away, and quite a few of them have the Junakwa crest. You know, you see the woman with the sleepy eyes, the puckered up lips, outstretched arms, large pendulous breasts, and that's our people's name for what most people in Canada call Sasquatch, and people in the United States call Bigfoot. We call it Junakwa, wild woman of the woods, but it was incorrectly translated, sort of like that lost in translation, I guess you could say, because there's actually a male one as well, but you only see it during the potlatch ceremonies when individual hosts a memorial potlatch for a family member, like a father, and when he does all the right things, such as hosting the potlatch, getting the family together to work for a year or more, accumulating things to give out as gifts, their wealth, and then, you know, getting regalia, the dance costumes ready, getting the food ready, and harvesting the food. And when they have the potlatch, they put the male Junakwa with a mustache on his face, and it's to acknowledge that he's upheld his role and duties, and now he becomes the chief of the family clan. And it's quite something to see when you go in a big house and you see all these massive cedar posts carved holding up the roof beams, and this massive cedar building like a rectangle, and, you know, 800 people sitting in there with their traditional attire on, and every one of those roof posts and beams are all beautifully carved of crest figures of the tribe from the region where that big house is. And you see on the dance floor the Junakwa dance being shown according to the family's interpretation to their crest and their story. And every potlatch you go to, you see different Junakwa dances. Some might have a basket on their back, some might be without a basket, some might have a baby one with them, and some masks are massive. Some of the families I've seen, huge Junakwa masks. So it's pretty amazing. It's a unique culture I came from. And of course, it was a commercial fishing village, and I was born into a commercial fishing family, so I worked my way up during the summer seasons on commercial fish boats, and then when I got out of high school, I worked my way up to the bridge of a fish boat. Most of my life was a commercial fisherman, so I traveled all over coastal British Columbia. And of course, you're sitting there talking to other tribes from throughout British Columbia's coast, and, you know, non-band native people, but they live on the coast, and you hear the stories about the creatures and all the different interpretations from the different tribes throughout it, and it was always intrigued me. And I'd hear the stories or ask the questions, and then I just sort of had an interest for it. And when the fishing collapsed in 1995, I guess, you know, we had no jobs. We had no fishery to go to, and I had a $60,000 debt for a net that I couldn't pay for, so I just thought, you know, I can't stay out in the concrete world. There's no fishing on the summer season, and the sea kayaking is getting pretty big, and my family, my band, my tribe had sent me in to be a watchman a few years prior in our abandoned Indian village known as Village Island, otherwise famously incorrectly known as Mamalalakula, Village of the Last Potlatch. We actually call it Mimkamlis, the village with the rocks and the islands out front. And as far as the last potlatch, it's hardly that. It's a site that in 1921, a lot of our people went to prison for celebrating the potlatch because it was banned, and the government confiscated quite a bit of our people's treasure, our masks, costumes, talking sticks, copper shields. It was a nasty thing that took place because of a potlatch in that village, but our people in 1951, when they legalized potlatching once again because it was not put into the second edition of the Canadian Indian Act, so my grandfather and other leaders saw that it was legal once again, and Atustu, to rise again, happened. They began to openly celebrate potlatch without the fear of going to prison or having their regalia confiscated. And the government agents that thought they'd eradicated our ancient ways, our laws, our, basically our religion, I guess you could say, in the old times, and the unification tool of a nation to keep it strong is one of the superpowers of the coastal First Nations for hundreds, if not thousands of years. I don't like to use the word revived. I like to use the word that it came out of hiding because we'd hid it through the banning of the potlatch days. And once again, the Junahwas came out, and also the Bukwas. And I noticed on the banner you put a picture of me in my Bukwas outfit. Well, the Bukwas, and that's one of the things I'm trying to clarify with everything, is for generations, a lot of people have thought the Bukwas is the Sasquatch to our people. It is not. The Bukwas is from the spiritual realm. It's a small bipedal creature with hair, looks after the ghost world. It moves very quickly and fast, and it comes out onto the beach at low tide at nighttime and harvests its favorite food known as jolly, cockles, a type of shellfish like a clam. And it's very good to eat, and of course the Bukwas comes out for that. But like I said, the Bukwas is a whole different thing altogether. It's something in the spiritual realm. And it's the Junah, male and female, that is our equivalent of what people call Sasquatch and Bigfoot. And that's how I got my interest. And when I went out during the crash of the commercial fisheries, and I went out and started doing native cultural tours and being a watchman and building campsites and doing different things to generate my revenue, I was living out in the mouth of Knight's Inlet in my traditional territories. And in the early 90s, we heard something, smelled something behind our trailer that we'd brought onto the beach there and put up there for our accommodation, built a little addition. And then in the early 90s, we went in with, before the crash, I went in with my commercial fish boat and anchored out. And for almost an hour and a half, we were, I guess you'd say, gifted to enjoy being watched and prowled around by, and a curious couple of Junahwas came out to the beach, and we'd put them on our spotlight from the commercial fish boat and lit them up. And it was amazing to see these two Bigfoot on the beach. And after 25 minutes, they wouldn't move. We shut the spotlight off because we didn't want to kill my battery, and they moved into the bush and pushed a rotten tree down, and you could hear them walk through the bush, and they whistled, chirped, and then after about an hour running my motor to keep bring my batteries charged again, because that spotlight draws quite a bit of juice, the big male came out again, and it actually walked along the beach about, I guess, probably 50 yards at the most, 60 yards, I guess, from my boat, and paralleled it at anchor. And all I remember is how big that bloody thing was in the moonlight, and I was crouching as I was walking until one of my crewmen pointed at it and said, "What the beep is that?" And that thing stood up, and I'll never forget the long hairs hanging off its left arm when it stood full up, and I just went, "Wow, that thing's huge." And it strode down the beach, went into the bush. We hit it with a spotlight again as it was going into the bush, and then it whistled really high-pitched, and then there was a higher pitch, almost like a female type voice whistled back, and we could hear them going through the bushes in the salal, and that was our experience, and that's what really tweaked my curiosity to find out what the heck those things are.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Yeah, and to kind of get back a little bit to how you got into this. I mean, you also you're a former grizzly bear guide. You did a lot of volunteer. You were a watchman for logging camps. During the winter shutdown. Yeah, that's fascinating stuff.
When the crash came to the commercial fishing, I remember I used to sit there and it just drags at you. You want to be on a boat and you can't do it because a lot of the boats were taken away. Licenses were doubled up, they called it, meaning you have to have two licenses on your seine boat. Now the commercial fish, salmon, and herring seasons, that was the same thing, and it just got really political with our government. So I went into to be the watchman and do the tourism, and I met this guy with a yacht. He was a commercial guide outfitter in the region of my territories and other tribes that are neighboring tribes. So he hired me as assistant bear hunting guide, and I ended up becoming his head guide and specialized in black bears and grizzly bears and black-tailed deer, and we did some fishing as well. But, you know, I was summer in the village island doing the native tours. September I was on his yacht doing the hunts until, I guess, first week of December. And then I'd go to Campbell River and cash in all my loot and go get drunk for a day or two and have some fun and let out some steam. And I'd jump on a float plane and fly deep into the inlets where I just came from hunting. And all the loggers were boarding the air float planes flying out for the winter shutdown. And I'd have a 60-man camp with 3 big barges all to myself with a bunch of pickup trucks and 12-passenger aluminum crew boats and everything you need to have fun, get paid to go poke around and look around, clam digging, fishing, hunting, and trying to find the big fella. But I never did in the wintertime. I guess I was in the wrong region. But, you know, I'd seen some things and heard some things at night. But I was out in the bush, and then I, you know, when I had time off, I just basically go back to bush again, going with my family members and friends. We go commercial food fishing, it's called, go for prawns and everything. So I've always been attached to that bush, and I was one of the pioneers of commercial grizzly bear tours. I hung up my trophy hunting gun after many years, and as I bought a 12-passenger tour boat, got it made brand new in early 90s, and I figured I'd be a trophy hunting guide for black bear and grizzly bears, and that I'd also be a 12-passenger tour boat bringing people in the inlets to see grizzly bears. And I realized you couldn't do that. You know, the people, when they found out that I was also a trophy hunter, they wouldn't come on my company, so I had to make a choice. And I figured I killed enough bears. I helped kill hundreds of black bears and, oh God, probably close to 30 grizzly bears or more. So I just thought, enough's enough. I've shed enough blood, and they're going to disappear because we're removing them too fast and they can't reproduce. So put the 338 and the 375 H&H away and went into eco-cultural tourism, where I'd share my native legends and stories that belong to my family with the bear watchers and the orca whale watchers and people who wanted to go see wolves. So I got a really good hands-on experience about tourism. And I had a sea kayak camp. I still have it, with 5 cabins that are made of red cedar that look like traditional West Coast native longhouses with orca designs on them. So you can lie in these cedar cabins and look out the windows and see and hear the whales and cruise ships and everything, and then jump on kayaks that we have and take you out exploring and paddling with whales and close to the grizzly bears on the beaches. And then all of a sudden I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, there's this BFRO on TV. Boy, that's gaining some huge recognition for the big fella, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. And I said, you know, I look at all these things called podcasts, and no offense, you know, to me the Internet's the most powerful tool in the world. You know, to us Indians, and no offense, we like to call things they got white man's magic. You know, the Internet's magical. You can even use, algorithms to make sure your ad comes up and someone who needs to go whale watching with you. So when I put all those together, I said, you know, hey, maybe people want to go exploring and see if they can, you know, if not find a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, maybe at least they can learn how to go out and actually look for these things properly, because most of the guys on TV don't, you know, no offense, but they really don't know what they're doing out there, you know, banging sticks against trees. You don't do that. You know, it's not the way to draw in a Bigfoot. You know, to our people, we're taught, you know, when you hear wood against wood, if you go hunting or harvesting or even go to a beach to clam dig and you hear wood against wood or something's thrown at you or trees are shook, you stop, turn around, go back where you came from, jump in your boat or your vehicle and get out of there and go somewhere else and look around. If you don't see any evidence like cockle shells piled up on the beach, or you don't hear wood against wood or trees shaking, then that means they're not there. You can harvest. because the one thing with we Kwakwaka'wakw and all First Nations I'm finding in my journey with Sasquatch Island and the Hamumu Adventures, we all have the same common belief. Canadian First Nations and North American Indians, we respect those creatures. We don't ever try to harm them or hurt them, or definitely don't ever try to kill them. But we respect them. Here we go, see if we can see them, and that's when, it's the world's changed now. We have to go out there as Native people and bring people and guide them, And I experienced that in Nebraska here in the last couple of days, and it's the same thing, the respect level. And now I'm doing Sasquatch Bigfoot tours. The one I really want to do, though, is when someone books, and it's called Live Like a Sasquatch. It means we go up to northern Vancouver Island and bring up my double kayak, if it's just one person, and we bring enough food in a dry bag to last us for, 4 days. When we get out, dropped off by a water taxi or someone's boat out in the Broughton Archipelago, we put our survival food that's in that dry bag, our cell phone in there, and we seal it up and we put it in a compartment. And from that point on, we live like a Sasquatch. Our water comes from out there. Our food comes when the beach is low and we harvest, or what we can catch with hooks or traps, and what we can harvest in the land. Basically, it's just going out and learning survival skills like a coastal First Nation knows, but also like the Sasquatch knows, because that's what he does every day. And that's the kind of expedition I like. But we also do walking tours in Seattle, Vancouver, and Victoria called Sasquatch Safaris. And then, of course, we do the day trips, boat trips, all kinds. We're a custom tour company. So if someone phones me and goes, "Ooh, I want to stay in a hotel," I'll do that. I'll find a floating hotel out in the inlet somewhere, and we'll stay there and go exploring.
Thomas, I got to ask you, you have this real passion for the subject of Sasquatch. Do other First Nations individuals, especially in your circle, do they share the same interest? From my experience over the years, just being here in the United States on the U.S. side, a lot of Native Americans, First Nation people, they don't really talk a whole lot about the Sasquatch phenomenon.
Well, that's what I found out in November 2016, just a few months back. I went to Sasquatch Island. A friend of mine had started that group, and it was in reference to Vancouver Island, because all the Sasquatch is there. It's the highest concentration of Sasquatch sightings that I know of for an island. And when I went to his group, it had a button that said, "This group needs a moderator." So I stupidly, I guess, clicked the button and became the moderator. And I thought, okay, now that I'm a moderator, I said, I've been reading all these groups, kind of. I guess I post things. And I said, well, first off, we're going to clarify what Sasquatch to the Kwakwaka'wakw people are. And I reached out to one of my second cousins. I call him my advisor. He's actually younger than me, but he's a master carver. Man, does he make good junakhamas. But out of respect for him, he always says, you like going public. I don't like doing that. I don't want to talk on your things or anything. But I ask him for advice and private message nowadays, or phone him, and he answers me. So he's lived in Alert Bay all his life. He's very knowledgeable. But I also go to other people, and what I've found is, you got to look at us Native people. We've been marginalized. I don't want to come across like a whiny Indian, because I got no time for whiny people, period. But, things that have happened to us, like the residential school system, the banning of the potlatch, the physical and mental physical and sexual abuse in the residential schools, the, marginalization where we had to fight for our jobs in the old days, like commercial fishing. And, our people are very apprehensive to talk to the non-natives, and always have been, and probably will stay like that for quite some time, until the marginalization and acceptance as an equal comes to be. So when people go in, and I've seen it, I've seen Dr. John Bindernagel and listened to him. He's my scientific advisor, and others, and they all say that. And it's like, almost like the Native people will clam up, shut up. And I'm like, yeah, it's normal. And it's because of that. And so when I started this Sasquatch Island, took over it, and all of a sudden I had 42 members when I took over it in November 2016. So I'm like, okay, got to do like the Moccasin Telegraph, I guess, and like a bingo palace. I got to get word out. So I got word out and still do it with the post of the day on numerous sites. And all of a sudden it just started to snowball. All these people are like, holy smokes, there's finally an Indian that's talking. And, you know, I know some of my native people might say I'm talking too much, but I believe we need to share our stories. Number one, I've heard it too many times in funerals, and people are crying at the funeral or at the wake, and they're, oh, I should have recorded the stories that he or she had. Oh, they're gone forever. And I've sort of, me being, you know, looking at history and that, I'm like, this is, you know, we have to retain these stories. And so I started, you know, putting Sasquatch Island together, and then all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, you know, half these people out there that's talking Sasquatch, they're just talking foolishness, you know, especially all this woo-woo stuff about jumping in UFOs and cloaking and jumping through portholes and going up wormholes and mind speaking to people. And I'm just like, wow, this is just a bunch of BS. I'm like, they're just really disrespecting the Sasquatch when they talk like that. And so I sort of took a hardline stance about, you know, we have to take the Sasquatch equation and we have to build a wall that Donald Trump will be proud of, separating the woo-woo from the critterist. And I'm a critterist. So that thing eats, sleeps, and poops and pees just like I do and doesn't do anything magical. But out of respect for my fellow First Nations and North American Indians in the United States, the ones that believe in shape-shifting and skinwalking, hey, I totally believe that. It's like, well, I totally believe in the Jonakwa. Even if I'd never seen one or heard one or smelled one, I would totally believe in it because our law says that those crests are things that are out in our world, and the Jonakwa, being in my culture and heritage, according to our law, it means it's a critter. It's out there. And, of course, we have the spiritual realm with other creatures. But just speaking about the critters that are living out there with us, well, the Jonakwa is, you know, I believe in it. But at the same turn, I'm not going to contaminate it by saying, oh, maybe they jump in spaceships. That's why we can't find them. No. Our stories say they live in an invisible home. That's why we can't find them, meaning they camouflage really good up in the mountains or wherever they choose to live. So it's with the Sasquatch Island, it sort of evolved, and I'm sitting there looking at, you know, people are scratching their heads speculating, oh, maybe they eat this and maybe they eat that. And I'm sitting there going, you know, you study animals and you hunt bears enough, and if you're going to hunt a bear, you got to know what they're eating, you got to know those seasons, you got to know the regional difference on those seasons. Campbell River and Central Vancouver Island, the salmon berries might be online right now because it's the time frame, end of May, beginning of June. But if you go 60 miles or 40 miles north or northeast into the inlets, because of the shade and the cooler weather, the salmon berries won't come online for another 10 or 14, 16 days afterwards. So you have to know just by looking at the color of the salmon berries and the scrub bushes when you're on a boat or an airplane, you got to know where those high concentrations of proteins are coming on. And then when you're commercial fishermen, native food fishermen like me, and you know about the hooligans coming in or the herring coming in March and April in certain regions of the coast, and the things are spawning ankle-deep water, and you just bend down and pick up these big herring the size of bananas and fill a 5-gallon bucket in a few minutes. And then hooligans come in and go to the head of the inlets in end of March, April, earlier in some places further up north, and they just turn these glacier melt rivers black with the millions of hooligans, like a smelt that come in to spawn. And then you have all the bulbs coming online, the salmonberry shoots, the fiddlehead ferns, the salmon berries, the thimbleberries. Your salmon now are showing up, seaweed harvest time, and clams. When's the right time to eat clams? Well, I don't eat them May, June, July, or August. There's a chance they're green. They're full of photoplankton, so they taste like that green photoplankton, and it's disgusting. And plus it's paralytic shellfish poisoning, red tide season during the May, June, July, August. So Sasquatches and humans, we don't touch shellfish until September onwards, until April. So everything's a cycle, and I correlated that with Sasquatches in my region. And I started to sit back and listen, compile the reports, and all of a sudden I started going, hey, wait a second here. I'm starting to get a pattern. And then one night I was sitting there with my wife, Peggy, here in Kent, Washington, and we were just sitting there having a wine, chattering away like a couple of Sasquatches, chatter, chatter, chatter. And we have the map of Pacific Northwest and southern British Columbia's coastal region, and I looked at it and I started talking about what I'm seeing with the migration patterns of the Sasquatches going to Vancouver Island in when the snow starts to melt and this time of the year, move up and then start harvesting everything up in the alpines, with the fawn drops with your deer especially. The bears go up there, the black bears. And on the mainland, the grizzly bears follow the retreat in snow because that's where all the ungulates, like your mountain goat, your deer is, and, of course, fawn drop. That's where the high concentration protein is. And then you got all that greenery growing, all those bulbs and herbs and flowers. And you just look at the grizzly bears up in those alpines, and they're just like a weed eater sitting there chomp, chomp, chomping their way through these meadows. And when they get a chance to get a fawn drop or a small fawn, they'll go for it. And so I started looking at it, and I'm saying, Sasquatches are doing the same thing. They're disappearing in May. They're following the same place those bears are going. So a apex omnivore has to have high concentration of protein. If you compare a Sasquatch to a grizzly bear, and it's 6,500 calories per day, I think minimum a grizzly needs, that's a lot of food you got to chaw down. So started looking at them going up there, no vocalizations down at sea level. And then all of a sudden when our salmon in southern British Columbia, just like Washington State, Puget Sound, start to show up in the rivers and creeks and the shallow waters upriver in mid-August, that's when the Sasquatches come down from the high grounds and they start feeding on the salmon up in the spawning grounds. And then end of September, when the pink salmon and the sockeye and a few cohos sort of taper off a bit, you start seeing some of those Sasquatches show up and vocalize in the western Broughton Archipelago. And that's why the Jonahua and the carvings, mask and paintings and totem poles has puckered up lips. Whoop, whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the Jonahua. They're hollering from island to island, end of September, beginning of October. It's no different than a bunch of commercial fishermen walking into a bar in one of the ports after a fishery, and they're hollering across to the pool tables to a buddy, and they look over, coming out of the pissers, another buddy, and they're hollering at him. It's no different. You sit down, you talk, what did you do for the last few months? Where were you? How was life? How was family? Oh, my family, these people passed, and that's what I think the Sasquatches are doing too. But when me and Peggy were chatter, chatter, chatter like the Sasquatches that night, all of a sudden it just went off like a light bulb. I said, son of a bitch. These are the territories of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation. You got your Comox, you have your Kwakiutl, your Numgeese, your Wallace Kwakiutl on Vancouver Island's east shore. And then if you look into the Broughton Archipelago and that whole chain of islands between Vancouver Island and the mainland, you have the Mamliacha, the Kwakiutl, the Mumtagila, the Wiwakai, the Wiwakam, the Kwika. And then you look on the mainland, and they have territories over there, but there's also the Nachdau, and then there's the Jawadenoch and the Kwawenoch. And I said, we know our boundaries within our tribes. They're painted as pictographs. They're prominent points. Some places are petroglyphs, rock carvings. Some places are geography marks, like between rivers. And all of a sudden I said, it's almost looking like the Sasquatches have the same tribal boundaries. Their tribal boundaries and the migrations I'm seeing up in the western archipelago and further into the mainland part of the archipelago is correlating in the movement to the tribal boundaries of my people. So that's what I think's happened. It's just speculation. It's just I guess you could call it a hypothesis or whatever. And that's what I'm trying to prove. Number one, prove those things exist. Number two, then work on, at the same time, trying to prove that they have these clan boundaries that compare exactly to the Kwakwaka'wakw tribal boundaries. And, that's something that no one else is doing out there. Everyone else is still trying to find a needle in the haystack in Turtle Island, mainland, North America. We've given the Sasquatch researchers how many generations now since Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin got that beautiful video of that Chunahua. It's exploded. But everyone's been out there banging sticks against trees and trail cameras and expeditions, and they haven't come up spades yet that I know of anyway. And I went to see Todd Neese with the American Primate Conservancy with Peggy last year, and met him and his wife Diane, and I basically pleaded my case. I need help. I got this big, huge chunk of territory called Vancouver Island Northeast, Broughton Archipelago to mainland, and I need help. I need fellow researchers to come help me because it doesn't seem to be working in the rest of North America. Maybe we should go where these things come on the beaches and they holler at night in the end of September and October, and when we hear them whooping away, we can go move in on there with your fancy night vision things and your listening devices, and maybe we can capture one of these guys on video, light them up with spotlights, and get our conclusive proof. So that's why I went, and Todd all of a sudden wanted to start Operation Sea Monkey, and then when I heard him and Diane talk about their American Primate Conservancy, it was exactly what I want to see. Areas preserved for them and also protection measures for them. So every Tom, Dick, and idiot out there with a camo and an automatic gun isn't trying to shoot them, because we've got to give them respect. We don't go shoot them. Shoot them with a camera, that's all.
Yeah, Thomas, you speak so matter of fact when it comes to Sasquatch. Why do you think, obviously being the First Nations and being here, for God knows how long in the Americas and everything, but why do you think other people are very skeptical of the subject of Sasquatch and then actually being a physical thing, a real thing?
Because I took an airplane a couple days ago from SeaTac Airport to Los Angeles. I got on another one, and I flew to Omaha, Nebraska, and then we repeated that getting back today. And the whole time it was daylight, and Peggy let me have the window seat. But I'm a smart Indian, eh? I bring my binoculars when I fly on airplanes, so I can look down at the mountains and rivers and all that terrain. And going to Nebraska and back, I went over environments I'd never seen before. But I looked down there, I thought, boy, those skeptics, not only are they silly, but I don't think they've ever been in an airplane during daylight with no clouds and with a pair of binoculars and looked out the window. They're probably watching a video screen or sleeping. I'm looking out the window, looking at all that empty space. There's no human critters down there. There's Sasquatch critters down there, and ungulates and bears and raccoons and greenery and fish and creeks and crayfish and freshwater shellfish. And, when I went to Nebraska, I heard what was in that Missouri River. I'd never ever seen that river before. And I heard about all these different types of fish in there, and I thought, it's no different than the coast and all that empty area. So that's a skeptic is a couch surfing opinionist. They got to get on their rubber boots and get out with us Sasquatch researchers and go get muddy a bit, and then they got rights to talk. Most of them, they got no rights to talk. They just squealy opinionists. That's the way I look at it.
Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. a breath of fresh air. I appreciate that. Now, speaking of, we just kind of mentioned your trip. Do you mind talking about your trip to Nebraska? Because when I think of Sasquatch, I'll be honest with you, I don't think of Nebraska, but I'll be honest with you, I've never been there. So I'm not going to bag on it because I don't know. But you have. Describe your experience and why you went out there.
Well, the main reason I went out there is because of one of the questions you asked me earlier about why don't the Indians talk, and that's what I'm doing with Sasquatch Island, because it's Sasquatch Island now. This doesn't refer to Vancouver Island. The Facebook group and everything I'm doing, it refers to what us indigenous people of North America have called North America for thousands of years, Turtle Island, because it looks like a turtle with Mexico and the narrow part being the tail, Florida, flipper, Baja, flipper, Aleutian Islands, a flipper, Labrador, Quebec, or Newfoundland, a flipper, Hudson's Bay in the north of Canada, and all those islands, the mouth. So Turtle Island is North America to the indigenous people, and always will be. I'm just, because I'm a Sasquatch enthusiast and researcher, and I'm after the native Indian story, I'm calling it Sasquatch Island. So it's referring to North America now. And I want to be the one to go out and finally do what I did in Nebraska. I made history. A Canadian Indian journeyed by airplane to Omaha, Nebraska's southeast corner, and met with Barry Webster and his brother Derek Webster, a.k.a. Big D, who are Omaha Indians from the tribe, and they have res squatching. That's their thing. They take people out and show them what I'm doing, exactly, but in their traditional territories. And history was made this week where a Canadian and a North American Indian research teams got together. And because I'm doing the television show Sasquatch Island, a lot of the television programs, they go rushing into the Indian reserves. Oh, we want to film you for the Sasquatch Bigfoot. Well, right away, you're disrespecting the people. You have the Sasquatch Bigfoot, which is very respected by our people in both countries. But at the same turn, you don't go in there like a Hollywood director and start barking orders that you want this and you want that and you want to see this and film that. Our laws state that you go sit down with them. Basically, it's a term, but to sit with them and get to know one another. We're joking with each other. Barry was ripping me a new one with all the jokes he was throwing at me and teasing me, but you take it in jest and you laugh along with it. It's just our nature. That's why as Indians got big cheeks. We like to laugh. And, we got to know each other. And Big D, he was, checking me out. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the few hours we spent with each other, all of a sudden we're friends for life now. Now I can come back after talking to them, and I can put the contract together and send it to them, and they'll look at it. And once they're in agreement to the contract, the ink that's on the paper, we'll all sign it. And now we have a binding contract. Now my camera crew goes down there, called Wild Woman Productions, Victoria Williams from Edmonton, Alberta, who's a Cree and Dene Indian, and some Métis in her, and with her cousin Amanda, who's going to be a co-host, and she's Cree Dene, and she's just a whip in front of lenses, man. She's just posing and laughing, and she's great. And my wife Peggy, and we're going to go there and we're going to film them, and we're going to get the Aboriginal Indigenous Peoples North American Indian story out, produced by Indians, and it's going to be done according to our laws, protocols. So when I do go down there, Barry will line up, and his brother, that I first, before the camera lenses come off, I sit and ask permission of their chiefs and their elders. Once they give the blessing, and we know our boundaries and, what we can and cannot film or places we can and cannot go. I learned when I was down there that the cottonwood, they don't cut it down and burn it. The cottonwood is sacred to those people because it's their tree of life. And, simple things like that, most people don't even think about that. But I'm ensuring all of those protocols and permissions are in place before the lens caps come off. And can you imagine when I do 20 different episodes with different Indigenous people throughout Turtle Island, Sasquatch Island? When I talk to the Seminoles and I go down to San Diego and talk to this other guy who's part of Res Squatching, and I go to other corners of Turtle Island, and I film and interact with the Indigenous people. Number one, they're going to be more responsive to open up with me because I'm a fellow Aboriginal, and I've covered the protocols. And, some of the people that might be listening to this might be rubbing their hands going, ooh, what a good idea. I'm going to grab my non-Indian camera and my camera crew, and I'm going to go rushing off and do what BFRO did, but what Tom's saying, focus on the Indians. Well, if you ain't an Indian and you don't have what I've taken me years to compile, a production team, a co-host, a good team, you're going to be floundering around like a fish out of water. And that's what's happened to date. And that's why, I've been reaching out with the modern day smoke signal, the internet and social media. And I have some of the biggest names in the Indigenous people when it comes to Sasquatch investigations or research or history and stories and legends. And even their dancers, I got people lined up that are just chomping at the bit. Oh, can we show our dancers from Northern British Columbia on your TV show? I'm like, absolutely. And, we're going to get out to the living rooms, the laptops, and the cell phones of North America and hopefully the world, our story, shared by our fellow First Nations to one another. Yes, it's a business venture, but we've done it according to our laws and protocols. And I think you're going to see something that's just going to floor the Bigfoot Sasquatch community, as Sasquatch Island, the Facebook group, already has. Every day I look at the praises I get, and I get all red in the face, embarrassed, because these people are saying things that really, really are nice. You know, they're giving me fresh whoops of fresh wind in my sail every morning when I sit down with my cup of coffee, which is Sasquatch coffee, by the way. No more Starbucks for me. You got to have a Sasquatch on the coffee bed. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. You know, I've a loving wife, Peggy, that, she's totally behind me, and she financially helped me get to Nebraska. I was actually going to take a bus, and she goes, "No, you're not. We're flying out there." And she took a day off work, and off we went. And lo and behold, the boys there with their operation, after we got meet and greet sort of out of the way and had put some hot chili in our bellies, at 12 o'clock we headed out to go do some squatching, and one of the vehicles got stuck in the mud, and because it's pouring rain out there, and boys got it out, and we all jumped in, and we went up, and I didn't know what to expect, and they brought me out to just up from where the cabins are at the campsite for the tribe, and not even a half a mile away, and we stopped on this paved road, and I'm thinking, what the heck? Paved road, car goes by, and after that car goes by, and they started doing prayers. They were praying in their language, and then they translated to English. Then they explained who they are, and Barry and Derek, and then they got every one of us to do the same thing, to talk to the Derek's going to slap me if I don't say the name right, Sintonka, and said who I was and where I come from, and with a calm manner. And then Peggy did the same, and then Peggy, we're on this dark road, no lights. One guy had a therm. They told him to keep it off, and I'm sitting there, and there's a ditch on either side of the road, and timber, and oak trees, and rain drips splattering everywhere, and I'm kind of thinking, this is kind of, different. And all of a sudden, you heard a little teak, and gets my attention, and we're listening. Everyone's quiet, and then all of a sudden, to me, it was like someone bent down in the forest, and the tree that's leaning over, that blew over the wind and broke, and maybe 4 inches thick, and it's got most of its root ball now right out of the ground. Well, just picture someone bending down and grabbing that small tree blown over. It's probably dry and old, and it tears it out of the ground. You hear that ripping noise and the breaking of roots, and then all of a sudden, kapash! It gets flipped 180. That's what we heard, and it wasn't more than 45, 50 feet from us. And I walked over, and I'm trying to smell and everything. I couldn't smell any. The wind was in our back anyway, and then you could hear 3 times where it screwed up. It stepped on something that snapped, but it was definitely bipedal, and it was definitely walking super stealth. And then we stayed for another 45 minutes or so, but me and Peggy had been entertaining a fellow friend of ours from Northwest Territories for 3 days prior to heading to Nebraska, spur of the moment. So we hadn't had any sleep, maybe 2-3 hours each night, and we were just throttled. At 1:30, I just told Barry, I just said, I'm nuked. And he's like, yeah, okay. So they dropped us, me and Peggy, off at the cabin. And they went back out, but they never heard anything. It started really raining hard. But I went to bed, and, Peggy right away, well, and I'm like, oh, absolutely. That was not a deer. They don't have bears down here. That was not a coyote, because they were yipping and yapping further south of us. I said that was definitely their big fella. And then it wasn't until yesterday when we left and we were driving out, and I was starting to, as your Gunnar stated, I have kind of a photographic memory. It's a curse and it's a gift. But anyway, before I went, I did, Art of War, Sun Tzu, we're in a battle here to try to find conclusive proof of these creatures. Well, what does Sun Tzu say? Do your recon beforehand. Send your spies in. Well, I did that. I used white man's magic. I used Google Earth, and I totally combed where I was going. So when I was thinking about it, when we were driving from the Indian reservation to Omaha to get a hotel room yesterday evening, I was overlaying all of that area and what I seen driving the highway now, and I thought about it, and I said, you know what? That's a unique enclave. That's not a migratory clans of Sasquatches. They're semi-migratory, but they're landlocked. All around them is outside of the Indian Reserve is farmers. And what have those farmers done? Chainsaw, backhoe, bulldozer. They've just eradicated what used to be forest, swamp, and groves of grasses and that. It's gone. So the Omaha Indian Reservation is an enclave. Sure, they do their own farming in there, but there's a lot of vast tracts of oak and elm and cottonwood and evergreen areas, they said. And then when I started thinking about it and I started piecing all the data together, I can honestly, because I want these boys to get bookings, number one. They need socioeconomic prosperity on that Indian Reserve, like every Indian Reserve throughout North America. So I want people to phone them up and go out with them, because you're going to go to an area where it's one of the second area I've ever seen, but it's the best area where I've seen Native Indian habituation of these creatures. And it's not the human against the animal, it's the animal to the human. Because where they took us, I believe what the family groups are doing, it's going to take me days to talk about it all, but that's for Barry and Derek to share. But they've had so many sightings down there. It's just amazing. The audio I listened to, the pictures I saw, I was just floored. And they've had other researchers go there, but they weren't comfortable to give them the goods, the good stuff, the platinum package. Well, Peggy and I got the platinum package, and I am going back there. We're going to contract up. We're going to go back and film it and release what they have. It's bloody amazing what they have down there. And I'm going to be very honored to be able to share their story with the world when we film it all and they release their stuff through the television show. They've asked for my help. I will bend over backwards and I will give it to them. And hopefully I'll help them with their socio-economic prosperity for that Indian Reserve, because every reserve needs it. I want to see a day where we have 30 tribes throughout Canada and the U.S. sharing through expeditions our stories, our culture, our history, our perspectives, our sightings. I probably heard over 40 different sighting encounters in the last 2 decades that come from that area. And I'm not going to share it on the podcast because we've got to wait for release, but they're number one. Like, they're just unreal what I've heard down there. We stopped with one guy and he's like, oh, I don't know much about it. And then next thing you know, he's talking, we're just small talking. He showed me where he had one in his backyard, and we're about to leave, and it's just starting to rain, and all of a sudden he goes, what tribe are you from? I said, well, I'm from the Kwakwaka'wakw, northern Vancouver Island. He goes, hey, you're the guy. I heard you on a podcast. And he names the podcast I did a couple, 3 episodes on. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, oh, just wait. I want my picture with you. I got to get my wife, too. And he goes into this house and calls his wife, and his wife comes out. She's kind of shy. And as soon as she found out who I was, she's just beaming, smiling. It was an hour and a half later in the pouring rain with her grandkids running around and splashing in the puddles, and all of us standing there. And this man, her husband, I don't know that many stories. He sat there and just kept popping story after story after story. And, I'd ask him, oh, what was it like, when you were a young boy? And then he's going back to when they were riding horses. And I tell you, that place they got some critters down there. And they're habituated back and forth. They're both habituating each other. And my dad always taught me, like when I asked him years ago, I said, what do I do if I run into a Sasquatch? Just speak Kwakwaka'wakw to it. Just tell them who you are, what you're up to, and you'll be all right. They're doing that. They're speaking their tongue to those creatures. And things are happening that is just, we haven't heard about it yet from anyone. You know, sure, the BSers come out with the gifting and the things and, ooh, big hairy Raven speaker said this to me and so forth. Yeah, it's a bunch of hokum. This is truly happening. They are habituating, and creatures are habituating the humans down there, and it is flippin' amazing. First time I jumped in an airplane to go on a Sasquatch expedition, I came up Spades. You know, Peggy was shaking and trembling. She was so scared when that thing flipped that log, and we'll be back. And it's just an example of what I wanted to do with Sasquatch Island back in November when I was sitting there with my coffee at night, scratching my head going, what do I post? What do I write about? And as it started coming and it started building, and especially since March, and I started doing posts of the day, but I share it on almost 30 different other groups. And sure, I get the odd flathead every now and then comes on there with a Bubba comment, oh, what's this post of the day, blah, 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 Indian stuff. And I just throw it onto the group and go, oh, if you guys don't want me sharing my post of the day on this group, I'll leave. And all of a sudden it's a tidal wave of people, no, don't you leave, you keep doing it. So I've achieved and am achieving what I wanted. I want conclusive proof of the Sasquatch. But like all those sailors that were lost coming from Europe and China and Japan, as soon as they hit Turtle Island, they scratch their head and go, oh, we're going to die in there. We don't know our way through that unknown land. So what did they do? They did the wise thing. They hired an Indian guide. And Lewis and Clark made it to the mouth of the Columbia River with Sacagawea and Carbonneau. And Alexander Mackenzie with his Cree Indians made it all the way from the St. Lawrence Seaway right to the mouth of the Bella Coola area, and he was the first guy to ever paint graffiti on our rock walls out in the coast of British Columbia. And I can go on with thousands of examples of smart European descent people who hired Indian guides. So if we're going to find these Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and we look back at what's happened in the last few generations, not much. No spade. We haven't come up with spades yet, other than Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. So now we got to sit there and look at what I'm doing and say, scratch your head and go, hey, Tom's on to something. Maybe we should hire an Indian guide. They do expeditions, or maybe we go to our local Indian reserve and go up to the tribal office and knock on the door after we ask a few tribe members where that office is and go in and say, can we talk to your chiefs, please? Oh, sure, I'm a chief. How can I help you? I'd like to hire some of your people, if it's possible, to hopefully find conclusive proof of Sasquatch Bigfoot. Oh, yeah, you better go talk to my cousin Johnny over there. He sees them all the time. They're always raiding his chicken coop because we live with them. You know, we accept them. Like, people challenge me all the time. Oh, there's no such thing as a Sasquatch Bigfoot. And I look at them and I go, you believe in albino humans? Because I sure do. It's scientific fact. And all of a sudden the skeptic always goes, oh, yeah, I live in Chicago. I've seen a couple albino humans before. They don't like sunlight. They wear sunglasses and big hats. Oh, I see. Well, I've never seen an albino human in my life, but I believe in them. And you've never seen a Sasquatch or Bigfoot in your life, and you don't believe in them. So one of us here is silly, and one of us here is pretty smart. I think I'll take the smart road here. See you later. That's how we have to look at it. That's the way I look at it, you know. And besides that, someone who tells me that as a skeptic, they're telling me that the Kwakwaka'wakw people and my ancestors that I've laid to rest and others that died before I was born, they're telling me when they say Bigfoot Sasquatch ain't true, I feel like popping them one in the nose and making them bleed double, because they're saying your ancestors are full of BS. They're lying, because we know there's a Junakwa, male and female. So don't ever go to an Indian as a skeptic. You know, if you hear those stories about us Indians beating up the non-natives, you're going to be one of them. You know, treat us with respect like we treat the Sasquatch with respect. Don't ever come and be a skeptic and think you're holier than thou and you're like Jesus and walk on water because you don't believe in these creatures, because they don't exist. They exist. Just jump on an airplane and go at 30,000 feet with a pair of binoculars and look at all that empty land and tell me there's not creatures down there that we haven't found yet. That's how I look at it.
Thomas, I'm going to have to jump in here because we are out of time. This is part one of at least a two-part conversation with Thomas Sewid.
That's all we're doing. That's not enough time. We need 6 parts. Your listeners are going to want to hear the rest. We got lots to talk about.
No, I was telling Shane it could be 12 parts because you just have and what you're doing with Sasquatch Island is totally unique. It hasn't been done before, and it's fascinating, and I can't wait to watch all the episodes. So we will be back.
Then go to the Facebook group and ask to join, and don't forget, you'll see it on there anyway, HamooMoo-adventures.com. Just think of Happy Cow, HAMOOMOO adventures.com. We do Sasquatch expeditions and adventures. The Seattle Sasquatch Tour, take advantage of it. There's a lot of Sasquatches in downtown Seattle in the concrete jungle there, and I'll go tell you everything about the Junakwa and everything else that I know about those creatures. And you'll even see my 2 dances. I got both costumes here.
Plus, I can vouch absolutely that Thomas is a blast to be around, and he will story you up. Let me tell you, he has had his own personal encounters and stuff. We've got to go. We will be back next week with part 2 of what will probably be a 16 or 17-part series by the time we get done. Thomas, thank you so much, my friend, for joining us, and thanks everybody for listening to Monster X Radio. We'll be back next week. Have a great week until then.
Go in peace, all. Bye.
Thank you for joining Monster X Radio.
Staples knows that when your spreadsheets no longer spread, it's time. When your presentations are not presentable, it's time. And when tensions in the office are high...
No, tensions are very, very high.
It's definitely time. And it's times like these when pros turn to Staples. Staples has a full range of tech services to help your business with everything from data recovery to virus protection. And right now, get $50 off PC diagnostic and repair service, so your business won't miss a beat. Staples, it's pro time. Ends 5/27. Service does not include parts.